but he never actually read the will. My name is Samantha Wilson, I'm 32 years old, and until recently, I was married to David for 7 years. His father, Harold, and I shared a special bond that David secretly resented. Little did he know, Harold had planned for this betrayal all along. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how karma delivered the most satisfying justice when my ex discovered what the will actually said. I grew up in a middle-class family in Connecticut where hard work was valued above all else. My parents sacrificed to give me opportunities they never had, including a college education. I graduated with a business management degree and quickly found success in marketing. Numbers always made sense to me, and I had a knack for organization and financial planning that served me well professionally. Deep down, I dreamed of starting my own consulting business someday. David stood out immediately with his charismatic smile and ability to command attention in any room. He was handsome, creative, and talked passionately about his ambitions in architectural design. When he approached me with 2 glasses of wine and a charming line about saving me from boring conversation, I was instantly drawn to him. Architecture is about creating spaces that change how people feel, he told me that night. I want to design buildings that inspire people. His passion was magnetic. We talked until the party ended, and he asked for my number as we left. Our chemistry was undeniable. The ring was modest but beautiful, and I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found my partner for life. Our wedding was small but joyful. Looking back now, there were signs I chose to ignore. David had changed jobs twice during our short courtship, always with stories about difficult bosses or companies that failed to recognize his talent. The pattern continued after marriage. He always had explanations that sounded reasonable at the time, but our financial stability rested entirely on my shoulders. David assured me his big break was just around the corner. When my career takes off, I will take care of you the way you deserve, he would promise. My first meeting with Harold Wilson, my father-in-law, was intimidating. David had warned me that his father was difficult to please, and I was nervous about making a good impression. To my surprise, Harold and I connected immediately. He asked thoughtful questions about my career and listened with genuine interest. After dinner, he invited me to see his home office where he showed me his collection of business books, many of which I had read. That is something I have tried to teach David for years. While David often found excuses to step away early, Harold and I would discuss business trends and investment strategies. David grew increasingly resentful of our connection. As years passed, our financial struggles intensified. David remained unemployed for longer periods, and his job searches became increasingly half-hearted. When I gently suggested he might consider positions outside architecture, he accused me of not believing in him. Our arguments about money became more frequent and heated. "You make me feel like a failure," he would say. "Do you know what it is like living in your shadow?" I took on a management position that required longer hours and more travel. Though the promotion helped our finances, it put additional strain on our marriage. David claimed I was prioritizing work over our relationship, never acknowledging that my hard work was keeping us afloat. 3 years into our marriage, Harold was diagnosed with terminal cancer. During family gatherings, David performed grief dramatically when others were watching, but checked his phone constantly when he thought no one was looking. He arrived late to hospital visits and left early, always with plausible excuses. Meanwhile, Harold and I grew closer. During his lucid moments between treatments, he shared stories about his life and business philosophy. But I worry about his judgment, especially when it comes to finances. In his final weeks, Harold asked to speak with me alone. His once powerful frame was now frail, but his mind remained sharp. He thanked me for bringing stability to David's life, and for being the daughter he never had. Something in his expression suggested he wanted to say more, but he simply squeezed my hand and said, "Trust that I see everything clearly." When Harold passed away, I was at his bedside. David arrived 20 minutes after his father had already gone, having delayed at a coffee shop because hospitals make him uncomfortable. I spent days helping arrange the service, selecting music Harold would have appreciated, and ensuring every detail honored his memory. David contributed little to the planning, claiming grief made it difficult for him to focus on practical matters. After the service, most condolences were directed to me rather than David, which I noticed bothered him enormously. At the reception, David remained distant, mingling with guests while I handled the caterers, thanked people for coming, and ensured Harold's wishes for the gathering were fulfilled. Several of Harold's closest friends embraced me warmly, saying, "He thought of you as a daughter." The attorney, Mr. Lawson, began with standard legal language before reaching the distribution of assets. He gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, but I was too shocked to react. I noticed his careful wording about David's inheritance, mentioning provisions and conditions within the attached documents. David certainly was not listening to these details. His mind was already racing with possibilities. Without consulting me, he made reservations at the most expensive restaurant in the city, ordering champagne and calling friends to join us. By afternoon, he had purchased a $200,000 sports car without discussing it with me. "It is my inheritance," he said with an edge I had never heard before. "I do not need permission to spend it." When I logged into our joint banking app, I discovered passwords had been changed. He dismissed my questions, saying he was organizing things and would explain later. New people suddenly appeared in our lives. David reconnected with old friends I had never heard him mention before. Business associates materialized with investment opportunities that needed immediate attention. Dinners at exclusive restaurants became nightly occurrences, rarely with me invited. When I asked about these expenditures, David acted annoyed. "Do you know how much money I have now?" I tried to reconnect with him, believing grief and sudden wealth were causing temporary behavior changes. My calls went to voicemail. The next morning, I suggested we talk about our future plans now that our financial situation had changed so dramatically. Maybe we could finally start the family we had discussed years ago. David gave vague, non-committal responses. David scoffed at the idea. "I do not need a therapist," he snapped. "I need you to stop analyzing me and give me some space." 3 weeks after the funeral, I finally confronted him directly. "Nothing is happening to our marriage," he said coldly. "But something is happening with you. You have become controlling since the money came in." "Controlling? I have barely seen you for weeks," I replied, shocked by the accusation. "Maybe you cannot handle that I am finally successful, while you have been lording your career over me for years. Maybe you are finally seeing me for who I truly am, and not who you tried to shape me into." Some nights he did not come home at all, offering thin excuses about late meetings or drinks with investors when I asked. My calls went unanswered for hours, sometimes days. Our joint checking account, which once contained our shared savings, was nearly empty. Large withdrawals appeared with no explanation. When I asked David about these financial changes, he brushed me off, saying he had moved funds to better investment vehicles, and that I would not understand the complexities. The bill included $200 champagne and several entrees. When confronted, David claimed it was a business dinner, but could not explain why it occurred at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. The confirmation of my fears came in the form of a misdirected text message. David's phone chimed one morning while he was in the shower. "Last night was amazing. Miss you already. When can you get away from her again?" Photos, intimate conversations, plans for their next meeting, all while I had been working to support us before the inheritance. That same day, I received a call from my friend Kimberly, hesitant and uncomfortable. I described what Kimberly had seen and asked for the truth, keeping my voice steady despite my crumbling interior. He accused me of spying on him and invading his privacy. When I remained calm and pointed to the evidence, his strategy changed. "Fine," he finally said with cold detachment. "So what if I am seeing someone? I deserve to be happy. To someone who cannot give me what I need," he replied. "Veronica understands me in ways you never could. She appreciates my vision and supports my ambitions without judgment." "I supported you for years," I said, fighting back tears. "I believed in you when no one else did." "You supported me because you could control me," he countered. "You loved holding your success over my head, making me feel small. Admit it, you stayed because you thought Harold would eventually leave us money, and you wanted your share." He was rewriting our entire history, casting himself as the victim and me as a manipulative gold digger, when I had been the one working 60-hour weeks to keep our household afloat while he pursued one failed venture after another. Despite the devastating revelations, some part of me still wanted to save our marriage. I offered to sign a post-nuptial agreement if he was concerned about the money. Counseling will not fix this. I have moved on. You should too. As the reality of the situation fully hit me, I felt the room spinning. My breath came in short gasps as the first panic attack I had ever experienced took hold. It had merely revealed who he truly was all along. Eventually, I called my friend Jessica, who immediately offered her spare room. The next morning, my body reacted to the trauma with physical symptoms. Nausea made eating impossible. Jessica brought me tea and toast, sitting quietly beside me as I stared blankly at the wall. The following days passed in a blur of shock and confusion. I called in sick to work, unable to imagine sitting through meetings and making decisions when I could barely decide whether to get out of bed each morning. I wore the same sweatpants for days, not bothering to style my hair or apply makeup. Jessica gently encouraged me to eat small meals and drink water, but everything tasted like cardboard. The weight of betrayal felt like a physical pressure on my chest, making each breath an effort. I spent hours scrolling through rental listings, eventually finding a small one-bedroom apartment with a manageable security deposit. Collecting my belongings proved another humiliation. Entering what had been my home with Jessica and her boyfriend to help carry boxes felt surreal. Many of my personal items, including family heirlooms and jewelry passed down from my grandmother, were mysteriously missing. The legal language was cold and dismissive, referring to our marriage as irreconcilably broken, and proposing terms that would leave me with virtually nothing. I struggled to find legal representation I could afford. "This is completely unfair," she said, reviewing the documents. "The amount would barely cover a few months of expenses in our city." My lawyer was shocked by the terms. "He expects you to restart your life with practically nothing after 7 years of marriage." "This is insulting," Melissa said. My financial reality became increasingly precarious. Our joint accounts had been drained. I calculated how long my personal savings would last while covering rent, utilities, and legal fees. The answer was alarming. Less than 6 months. Job hunting, while emotionally devastated, proved challenging. Several meetings with my manager had ended with warnings about missed deadlines and distracted behavior. Social media showed him vacationing in Europe with Veronica, dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, and attending exclusive events. The terms still included the NDA, which I resented but could not afford to fight. The day I signed the preliminary settlement agreement, my hand shook so badly I could hardly form my signature. For the final divorce meeting, I arrived at the attorney's office early, dressed in the most professional outfit I still owned. He wore an expensive new suit and designer watch, looking tanned and rested. The sight of him, so apparently unaffected by destroying our marriage, sent a physical pain through my chest. Inside the conference room, David performed affable politeness for the attorneys present. "I hope you are doing well, Samantha," he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You look good." Before leaving, he turned back briefly. "I wish you the best, Samantha. I truly do." The insincerity of his words was the final insult. The marriage that had defined the last 7 years of my life was officially over, and not with mutual respect, but with calculated cruelty. My initial reaction was suspicion. I hesitated, explaining that the divorce was already finalized. "Or rather, it is related, but not in the way you might think. Please, Ms. Wilson, this meeting will be to your benefit." "Thank you for coming," he said, showing me to a comfortable chair. He did. He threw me out of our home and had already contacted divorce lawyers before telling me he wanted to end our marriage. Walter nodded, making a note. "And did you contest the divorce or try to reconcile?" "I see," Walter said, seeming relieved by my answers. "That confirms what I suspected." He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. My confusion must have been evident as Walter continued with a gentle smile. Walter let out a surprised laugh. "Did you even read the will?" he asked incredulously. He opened the envelope and placed a document before me. "The aforementioned sum of $62 million is bequeathed to my son David Wilson, conditional upon his remaining married to Samantha Wilson for a minimum period of 5 years following my death. During this period, the principal shall be held in trust with only income distributed. Should David initiate divorce proceedings or separation from Samantha within this 5-year period, 80% of the remaining principal and accumulated interest shall immediately revert to Samantha Wilson, to be placed in a trust under her sole control. Below this formal language was a personal letter from Harold, handwritten and addressed to me. Samantha, if you are reading this, then my son has made the choice I feared he would. I have watched you support David emotionally and financially for years, displaying the responsibility and character he lacks. I have observed his resentment of your relationship with me, and his entitlement regarding money he has not earned. This provision is not meant to trap either of you in an unhappy marriage, but to protect you should David reveal his true nature once wealth enters the equation. You have been more of a child to me than David in many ways, demonstrating the values I tried to instill in him. This money cannot buy happiness, but in your hands, I trust it will be used wisely. Forgive an old man's manipulation, but I had to ensure justice would prevail. The room seemed to tilt around me as I realized the implications. David's lawyer at the will reading was legally obligated to disclose these terms to him. But he never mentioned any conditions to me, I said, pieces suddenly falling into place. He rushed the divorce through as quickly as possible. Walter's expression darkened. That suggests David may have paid for information to be withheld or discovered the terms afterward, and attempted to finalize the divorce before you became aware. Either scenario constitutes potential fraud. I would be willing to represent you in this matter at minimal cost. Harold would have wanted me to ensure his wishes were honored. Before I could respond, my phone began vibrating continuously. Please call me. It's urgent. Walter observed the notifications with raised eyebrows. That evening, as I sat processing the revelation in Jessica's apartment, the doorbell rang repeatedly. Before me stood someone pale and shaken, designer clothes wrinkled, hair unkempt. The arrogance had vanished from his posture. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I've made a mistake. A huge mistake. What mistake exactly? I asked calmly, surprising myself with my steady voice. The divorce, he said quickly. It was hasty and unnecessary. I was confused, grieving my father. I wasn't thinking clearly. You seemed very clear when you told me I was useless to you, I replied. I didn't mean that. I was under enormous pressure. The inheritance, the responsibility. His performance might have been convincing if I hadn't just read Harold's letter. I still love you, he continued desperately. We can fix this. We can reconcile and start over. I'll make everything up to you. I promise. I asked the question that would reveal everything. His hesitation told me all I needed to know. The divorce is already final, David, I said quietly. Please, you don't understand. I've already spent millions. I bought properties, invested in startups, made commitments. Veronica left when the money started to run out. I need your help, Samantha. We can remarry, satisfy the terms of the trust. You need my help, I repeated, the irony almost overwhelming. I got carried away, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. The money, the attention, it was intoxicating. I wasn't myself. Looking at him begging on Jessica's apartment floor, I reflected on how differently I would have acted with sudden wealth. Expensive flower arrangements arrived daily at Jessica's apartment, until I requested the doorman refuse them. Jewelry appeared with notes begging for another chance. When gifts failed to sway me, David enlisted mutual friends to plead his case. He offered to sign a contract giving me complete financial control. He suggested we renew our vows in an extravagant ceremony to prove his commitment. We filed the necessary legal documents to activate the trust provision, triggering an immediate response from David's attorneys. They filed a countersuit claiming fraud and undue influence, alleging I had manipulated Harold into creating the conditional bequest. The case revealed disturbing evidence about David's actions. Email records showed he had indeed paid Thomas Bernard a substantial bonus to withhold information about the will's conditions. Bank transfers documented millions already spent on luxury purchases and risky investments. Most damning was a text exchange with Veronica discussing how to finalize the divorce before I discovered the inheritance conditions. The judge assigned to our case, a stern woman with 30 years of experience in family court, made her disapproval of David's behavior clear during hearings. When evidence of the attorney's ethical violations came to light, she referred the matter to the State Bar Association for investigation. With the ruling finalized, I suddenly found myself responsible for managing nearly $50 million. I had always been financially responsible, but this level of wealth required knowledge I didn't possess. Rather than making immediate decisions, I assembled a team of legitimate financial advisors, including a certified financial planner, tax attorney, and investment specialist with fiduciary responsibility. We developed a conservative strategy focused on preserving capital while generating sustainable income. When I remained firm, they progressed to implied threats about contesting the will, followed by offers of a private settlement if I would share the inheritance with their son. Their final attempt was a carefully staged accidental meeting at a restaurant where they brought an apparently chastened David to apologize once more. Friends I had neglected while working overtime to support David welcomed me back with open arms. Dr. Larson helped me recognize patterns of emotional manipulation I had accepted as normal and the gradual erosion of my boundaries during the marriage. We worked through the trauma of betrayal and abandonment, building healthier expectations for future relationships. As the legal dust settled, David's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He spread rumors among acquaintances about me stealing his inheritance. The court granted it immediately based on the evidence of persistent, unwanted contact and escalating behavior. Throughout this challenging period, I found myself returning to the business plan I had shelved years earlier. With the financial freedom to pursue it properly, I consulted with industry experts, refined my concept, and conducted thorough market research. The boutique consulting firm I had once dreamed of now seemed not only possible but perfectly aligned with my strengths. I found an ideal location for a small office, designed the space to reflect professional warmth, and developed service packages targeting small businesses needing financial guidance. Rather than trading on my sudden wealth, I built the business on my genuine expertise and work ethic. The positive feedback and referrals that followed validated that my success came from skill, rather than inheritance. This was something I had built myself, based on knowledge I had earned through years of hard work. While he had sought immediate gratification and status, I focused on creating something sustainable that would benefit others. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I barely resembled the shattered woman who had signed those papers. I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and smiled genuinely again. Regular therapy had helped process the betrayal without letting it define me. My first attempts were coffee meetings that never progressed further as I was still learning to trust my judgment of character. Eventually, I enjoyed a few pleasant dinner dates with men who seemed genuinely kind, though I remained transparent about not being ready for a serious relationship. The best part about dating now, I told Jessica, is that I know exactly what my boundaries are and feel no guilt about maintaining them. As my business thrived, I expanded services beyond my initial projections. The staff I hired brought complementary skills, creating a collaborative environment where everyone contributed to our success. Industry recognition came in the form of business awards and speaking invitations at conferences, validating that my vision had real value. The foundation became the most meaningful use of Harold's gift, transforming wealth into opportunity for others. Nearly 14 months after our divorce, I encountered David unexpectedly at a restaurant downtown. I had just finished a business lunch when I noticed him sitting alone at the bar, staring into a half-empty glass. After a moment's hesitation, he approached my table, a shadow of his former confidence evident in his hunched posture. "Samantha," he said quietly, "you look well." Up close, the changes were even more apparent. "May I sit for a moment?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. Against my better judgment, I nodded. The anger that had once burned so intensely had faded to something resembling indifference. "I filed for bankruptcy last month," he said without preamble. "I realize now what I threw away," he continued, eyes fixed on the table rather than meeting mine. For the first time since I had known him, David's words seemed genuinely reflective rather than calculated for effect. I considered his words carefully before responding. "Thank you for saying that, David." The boundary felt clear and natural. He nodded, accepting my decision without argument. As he stood to leave, I noticed the bill for his drink on the bar. not out of obligation or pity, but as a final gesture of closure. 2 years later, I stood on the stage at a national business conference, accepting an award for Entrepreneur of the Year.